Hi guys. Hope everybody's doing really well and you're enjoying your summer. And if you're going back to school, that you had a successful back to school experience, and that if you are formulating or working through that IEP, that you've got those meetings squared away and all those supports for your children are in place and ready to go for this school year. Um, I know for my daughter, she's done really well so far this year. She really enjoys her class. In fact, her favorite class is mathematics, which is uncommon for her. She really never took to mathematics, but she really likes the teacher that she has this year, which is great. Um, for her, it is a lot about the teacher and the approach. Um, as it stands right now, we are prepared for the hurricane. We're just going to have tropical storm effects here, hopefully. The storm is moving so quickly through the Gulf, it really can't um, depend on the forecast in terms of whether it's going to move further westward or it's going to turn back eastward. We know that once it crosses over the peninsula and through Georgia and South Carolina, it's supposed to curl back um, through the Atlantic. So a little nervous about that and what that'll mean for the coming weekend and early week next week. But we feel pretty comfortable here. Um, we're stocked up on everything. I bought some ice. We've got plenty of gas. We're just ready to go. For us, it's going to hit early morning tomorrow. So probably going to kind of wake up early when we start getting the major weather just to try to be aware of what's going on for my family. And so that'll be around 4 a.m. And again, I do want to apologize. It's been a while since I've actually vlogged and uploaded anything. Um, I've had some health issues going on lately, and I think it's all been kind of bubbled over by just some mental health discomfort that I've had here recently. But I'm working through those things, and uh, I think we all kind of go through these downturns and upturns and everything with our health. So, unfortunately, one of the big things that happened is I was supposed to have surgery in October, and my urologist actually quit the medical group. So I'm gonna have to find another urologist or see what to do there. So, but I'll work through it. Um, so I just briefly, before I talked about disenfranchised grief and my ordeals with that, I just wanted to briefly talk about my diagnosis and what I know about what is went on with me. I technically have a clinical diagnosis of prader-willi syndrome, so I don't have a definitive subtype that I have. I have a hunch on what my subtype could be. I've seen quite a few papers on folks that have just single characteristics that kind of jump out from the standard clinical showings of Prader-Willi syndrome, and then they'll have negative methylation for Prader-Willi syndrome, and that affects either parts of the 15th chromosome or the 6th chromosome. And if it's in the 15th chromosome, there's a section called SNORD 116 that it affects. Again, I don't know enough about genetics to know if, or my own genetic makeup to know that that would be the situation that I'm under. But all I know is I do have a clinical diagnosis of Prader-Willi since 1982, and it felt really important for me to tell everyone this because it's just something that whenever I say I had Prader-Willi syndrome, the first question is, well, what's your subtype? And I understand where that question comes from because as a parent, you want to kind of benchmark based upon others' experience with the disease that your child's facing, what their experience could be. And I think that is a important um, question to be asked for sure. I think, for instance, and I'm gonna give you an example. My daughter has a genetic diagnosis of tuberous sclerosis, and she has she is autistic, and that specific phenotype for autism kind of shows in the way that it affects folks with tuberous sclerosis. However, she has never shown any tubers, and we take her for annual kidney checks, annual neurological checks. She gets we're actually trying to get her another MRI going here soon, just to make sure that she's not developing any tubers. She goes to a dermatologist to look at that, and just the other day she went to the eye doctor to check her optic nerve to make sure that she didn't have any tubers developing on her optic nerve. So for all intents and purposes, my daughter has a genetic diagnosis of a disease, but she has no effects of that heralded effect of that disease with tuberous sclerosis. And there's actually a lot of people that have tuberous sclerosis that are in the same boat. They don't really have a lot of tubers or have a lot of incident of tubers that grow. But I just thought I would mention that because it seems like, you can have a genetic diagnosis and not have any effects or not have many effects of that genetic diagnosis, and then you can have a clinical diagnosis and have several effects but no genetic corresponding um, effect to it, or that it's not readily apparent. So I just thought that that's an intriguing example, with when we're talking about genetics and a syndrome, which is typically just a group of symptoms, um, that that there can be a, a devastating diagnosis with a really good prognosis, or there can be a bad prognosis with no definitive diagnosis. So um, those things happen. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about disenfranchised grief, and I know we talk about this in context of folks that are not able to drive, or not able to work, or not able to live independent lives, not able to um, you cohabitate, or that really don't develop interpersonal relationships and mates and things like that. Um, but in terms of just in general, uh, disenfranchised grief in terms of disability, what do you as an individual feel like you can't do, or your body tells you can't do because of your disability, and how that grief and what you've missed out on, how that's affected you? And I started to think about this again. I read the article about what the PWSA had put out about that. I didn't get a chance to listen in on the seminar for it, but I'm going to do so. But I wanted to just speak on how this, a similar example to this has affected me. Talk a little bit about my history with work, because I think that here as of late is something that I've been kind of grieving with. Um, and I have some notes about my thoughts here. Definitely, disenfranchised grief is a place whereby you can kind of become your child's greatest ally. Um, no should never, should not be the answer. It's always how, follow up with where, when, and why. So if your child says, for example, I really want to drive, but that the child has maybe some really bad vision restrictions, or habilitory restrictions, they can't effectively steer, or there's something in their habitus that doesn't allow them to effectively drive. easily, no should still not be the answer. I think the answer is the follow-up questions of, well, how are you going to do this? Where are you going to learn how to do this? Where are we going to, where are we going to take this? When was your plan on doing this? And why? What's your reasoning for wanting to do this? Why is it something that's important to you? I think if we can answer those questions both for ourselves and for our kids, we can work through that grief to some extent. Um, you have to kind of frame the desire and accommodation, because there's always going to be desire when there's grief um, in this type, uh, the desire to do those things, and sometimes we can accommodate um, to at least help that person soothe themselves through that grief. And I think about um, my nephew who is autistic that has a desire to drive, but I know that, and we know that he would not be able to do so. How can we help him through that? Can we, for instance, get him a go kart? Can we help him, go see cars? He loves to, go to car museums and whatnot. Can we help him? Can we go on test rides with him? Is there a car that he would like to ride in to see what it's like? How can we help him work through this? Is there some way that he can drive and not really be a legal driver, but maybe he can drive something to get that experience? So it's that kind of example and those kind of accommodations we kind of need to think that it's not just you can or no, you won't. It's how can I help you, you know, live up to the potential of what you have to do those things, whether there's accommodations that can be made for you to do those things that you want to do. And we have to have the grace and the understanding to say to our children, or let our children be who they want to be. We keep them safe, but we have to um, let them live out their lives. So I know it's easier said than done. And as a parent, you kind of wrap yourself up in worry about potential outcomes of things. But I think as an individual and a person that is longing and striving to be independent, they want to work through those things. Um, Now, in my life, disenfranchised grief has come kind of in a way that it happens for a lot of folks that are chronically ill, um, in terms of working and having ongoing chronic illness with trying to work and provide and succeed and have a career. Um, it uh, it took me a while to kind of come to the realization. It actually took me therapy to come to the realization that, um, you know, I'm not really giving up by no longer working. I'm just moving on to a different part of my life. And that I need to look back on the work that I have done with some kind of um, pride about it, or, just satisfaction about it. And I want to talk a little bit about my work history, because I know there are a lot of folks out there that are thinking about working, or what kind of work they want to do and things like that, and what can we do, or you know my work history is a little bit different, because I've actually been working since I was 16 years old. um, and I'm just kind of go through some of my jobs that I did um, growing up. Um, my first job, uh, if you want to call it this, is probably a really bad place for someone with prader-willi to work. But my first job was McDonald's. So I worked for McDonald's for 6 months, and it was very stressful. I had several nervous breakdowns at work, just trying to deal with people, and I, you know, it was really hard, and I was uncomfortable. Um, I had a lot of other things going on at the time that made it uncomfortable, but it's a tough job. It's a good first job. I don't recommend it for everyone, but that was my first job. Then I moved on to something a little bit more interesting, where I got more of a family feel of working, and that was working for Milo's grocery store. Um, and that was I was a bag boy at Milo's, and I enjoyed that, and almost got one of my stories is I was out pushing a cart, and a lady did not see me behind her and almost backed in between me and another vehicle. So I would have been cut off at the kneecaps had that lady backed up any further. But uh, things like that are going to happen, but they never leave you. I'll tell you that. Um, interesting job, and met some characters there, being kind of like that first, like, we're a work family situation going on, but it was really cool. Then I moved on to small industrial work for sauna press. That was interesting. I worked third shift doing that. This was in the summer when I was out for school, and basically I put together. I started doing like assembling CD sets when labels needed to go on CDs, or inserts in the CDs, and audio CDs, and moved on to that. Then I worked on material handling because I got bored, and I was really having a hard time standing in one spot um, because of my weight and the stress fractures in my feet. It was like arduous. And we would stand on, even though you were on those stress mats, you were still standing pretty much in the same place for 8 hours, and that was tough. So they let me do material handling, where I would just take the pallets and move them of the different parts, uh, and I did that for a while, and that worked out pretty good. Um, I made I made $7 an hour at that job. It was interesting. It was a long time ago, but then I actually the next summer I worked. This would be my senior year of high school. I worked as in Buncombe County, um, in Asheville, North Carolina, Buncombe County area. I worked in their summer care program at my old um, primary school. So I was one of the primary school instructors. So I had a group of about 7 or 8 uh, third graders, and for the summer, and that was quite an experience. We did field trips and things like that. And at the same time, I was working part time at another job in the summer. I was working for Carmike Cinemas. I was working in the box office. That was fun, and that kind of developed as its own thing. And let's see. Then the following, once I graduated in my first summer in college, I worked for Liberty Corner Enterprises, which was um, like a group home, habilitory, supported employment provider, respite care provider in Buncombe County, and I was in supported employment. So I would actually help folks at the job site kind of relate with their employers, and got to work in many different employment situations. Worked at Square D when that was um, in Asheville, in their factory. I worked at Warren Wilson College. We had a little enclave there. So just quite a bit of little varied employment situations there, working within supported employment. And I did not meet anyone at that point with prader-willi syndrome. through that work. Um, let's see. Um, then that winter, I actually worked seasonally for Walmart, third shift stocking for the Christmas holiday. And that was a really, really good thing. I worked basically and earned money and just bought Christmas gifts with that money, and really gave my family a nice Christmas at that point. And I remember that was a good little winter job. Let's see. Once I got out of um, college, my first job, not being in music, um, was working for Earthlink, the internet service provider, doing what they would call saves, where people would call in and cancel their Earthlink account. I would convince them not to. So that was a fun job, as you can imagine. But it was a lot of problem solving, and I actually did pretty well with it. You looked at that job as you look at a lot of sales job as being what is your conversion rate or your retention rate, and it was about 30%. So meaning that out of the 10 people that called me, about 7 people would actually cancel and about 3 people wouldn't, based on what I would talk to them and offer them. So that was a fun job, and Earthlink was a good company. And I worked for um, it was in a call center. It was a third party provider, but um, I got paid really well, and I had lots of perks with my job, so I really enjoyed that. Um, then I went on to I worked in supported employment some more. I'd met my wife, and we had moved to the Durham area, and I worked as a financial counselor. Again, kind of in consultory sales, I set up things called debt management plans for people that call in with debt, either medical debt, credit card debt, all kinds of debt. Just kind of help them get on plans, get set up to repay that debt in some way. And I would kind of go through a budget with them, and then we would review the budget and decide whether we could work up a plan for them to repay the debt, or they needed to look at another option like bankruptcy or um, settlement or something like that of their debts. Um, let's see. Then um, we moved from Durham back to Asheville a little bit, and then on to Largo, Florida. And when we worked in Largo, Florida, I worked for Microsoft through another provider, um, Lorica. I did work for Microsoft Ad Center. So that's very similar to Google AdSense. If you know anything about search engine optimization and advertising on the internet, basically that's what I did. Is I helped people set up their advertising campaigns to advertise on the internet. So I worked with Google AdSense to convert their existing advertising campaigns to Microsoft AdSense, and then I set up campaigns for them. I would call them, work an hour or two on a campaign, and then come back and bring it to them and say, hey, do you want to do this? And this is your rate on this. You're looking about this much a month based on these keywords that you'll be serving with your campaign. Keywords are words that you put in online for certain things to pop up, search terms and so forth. So I did that. I did really well with that, and then through Alorica, I started being um, an agent, advertising specialist, advertising service specialist. I always thought that was a funny acronym. Um, uh, so I would work with the advertising agencies, and with that, it was a little bit more difficult, a little bit more time intensive, and I had to set up invoice billing with these campaigns, and then I had to convince these advertising agencies who were not really fun and gracious people to work with, why their ads weren't serving or how how I could help their ads serve better or what they needed to do. And, you know, you it was pretty cutthroat, and they were pretty ruthless about, it works in AdSense, why is it not working? uh, it works in AdSense, why is it not working for Microsoft Advertising? And I'd have to explain that, that we're geo targeting and relevant keyword targeting. We're not just geo targeting search terms, and you have to do this and stuff like that. So it was fun. Very kind of an intense little job there. But so after working for Lorica, I got a job back with Capital One, and I did high value card servicing for a while, which I worked with people. I basically was customer service for folks with accounts over $2,500. So big spend, they call them high spend accounts. So that's what I did. Um, and then I stayed in that department for a year and a half, and an opportunity opened up, and I became a fraud service specialist. And for all the work that I did in my entire career, um, that was the most fun, the most independent, the most interesting work that I did. And I did that for a year and a half, and I collected over $250,000, recouped over $250,000, and helped helped Capital One, and uh, you know had a great time doing it. So um, then we moved back to Greenville, and I worked for TD Bank in Greenville, based upon my history with Capital One. And my health started to decline a little bit, and I noticed that my infections were a little bit more chronic. And the problem that I would have and still have is that I get um, a little bit foggy a lot when you're carrying around colonized bacteria, um, or when you have UTIs. And the older you get with UTIs, the worse. Your body doesn't acclimate to it all the time the same way it did when you were younger. So this brain fog was really detrimental to my work um, there at TD Bank. I was very slow. I could not keep up with the pace of being servicing. The intro, the intro, the intricacies, or uh, the the uh, the intricate parts of the work I was fine with. It was just being able to execute in a timely manner and do my job was just really a challenge. And to be there, because um, I would sit there for an hour, I would work, and I would just feel horrible because my infections were just going back and forth, and I was becoming more reliant on IV antibiotics and PICC lines and things like that. So eventually, in 2019, we kind of decided that I needed to step away from that, and because of my health, I needed to look at um, Social Security disability insurance. And I have to say something too about that. Going back to my mom originally applied for me to get Social Security insurance, SSI. As a child, you can receive that if you've got disabilities in 1982, and the state adjudicated the federal funds, as they do in every state. They denied me, but then in 1991 there was a federal case that said we didn't factor in pain and suffering in these claims and what these people deal with, so we're going to have to go back based upon this decision and re-adjudicate all the claims that have occurred, prior to 1991, and see if we can rectify those things. So they they awarded me back pay from SSI, or I was granted SSI in 2010, um, basically said, "We're sorry you applied. You've been disabled since 1982. We know this, and we're rectifying this based upon the court case, and your mother had applied for you." So they resolved that. In 2019, I ended up applying for SSDI, and it took me a year and a half to do that, and that's where I'm at today. And the reason it's hit me hard lately is I have this real need to go back to work and do something because, you know, with inflation, everything that's happening with the economy, it's just becoming really difficult to make it even on what me and my wife make, and um, but that I tell my wife I'm gonna apply for this job so we can get out of this problem or that problem, and she's like, you can't do that. You can't do that. I'm like, but I want to do it, and it comes back to that being a man and being able to provide for your family and all those things that I kind of worked through with therapy. The notice that I was contributing to my family as a father and a husband in ways that um, weren't just about monetary. And but anyway, I just wanted to share my experience with you about um, this disenfranchised grief that I've dealt with as a worker, that a lot of other workers deal with. Um, in that your kids may enter into the workforce and may have to deal with this at some point. And I just wanted to let you know my experience with it, let you know my employment experience, know what I did. Oh yeah, I wanted to tell you I did go back to Carmike. At one point, I became an assistant manager at Carmike, so that was an awesome job too. I loved working in a movie theater. I recommend that. I wish that was my first job. And if movie theaters are still around when your children are of age to work, definitely something I would recommend. Definitely. And they're really good about working people in with job coaches and, with disabilities, and getting those people involved. So definitely something I recommend. But again, thank you for listening to me rant here and talk about my history. And um, everything's going well, and I'll speak to you again soon.